Aloha and welcome to Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Frasier Institute. You know, when we don't talk about something, it often gets forgotten. And if it's very important, we can lose something dear and precious to us. That's the case with freedom, and in particular with economic freedom. When was the last time you heard someone talking about economic freedom or our economic freedom rights? Probably not very often. And as a result, I think there are some of these rights that we have that are disappearing here in Hawaii and across the world. I have the privilege today of talking with a good friend of mine from Mexico City. He's an economist who studies economic freedom, and he has many feathers under his cap. One is he happens to be the principal author for Mexico of a report by the Frasier Institute called Economic Freedom of North America. But he works with other organizations in Mexico, one of them, Caminos de la Libertad, and I'll tell him that I'll need him to translate that for us, but it's an organization that works for the promotion of free markets and individual liberty throughout Mexico. My guest today is Jose Torra. Please welcome Jose Torra, an economist, to our program. Jose, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Aloha
from, where are you now?
It's great to be here.
You're in Mexico City?
Mexico City, yeah.
Wow, that's an interesting place. Mexico City, tell me a little bit about the weather.
Well, right now it's pretty hot, but usually at this time of the year we have the rainy season. But of course, today we had the luck that there's no rain or no clouds outside. Pretty sunny tonight.
Well, you know, we're going to talk about economic freedom and the rule of law, but I thought it was so interesting this morning when I read my USA Today. I have a question for you, and I'll put this up here. Mexican drug lord escaped. So my first question to you, Jose, is where is El Chapo? Do you know?
Well, my guess would be he's back home in Sinaloa, but, well, who knows? It's been a really shocking news here in Mexico, the jailbreak. And, of course, it all came in a moment of certain instability with the drug cartels. You know, here there have been problems with that for the last maybe 8 years now, or 9 years that the drug wars have been going on. And, well, just when he got apprehended a year and a half ago, the Attorney General, Murillo Karam, said, like, okay, we're looking at the extradition thing. We want to send him to America, but we don't think there's a need for that because there's no risk of jailbreak. So now, a year and a half after, he gets out.
Yet in the international press, it was quite obvious he'd made strong claims, in fact, promises that he would escape, and he has a record of escaping jails. So why was it treated so lightly, or is that just the public relations of it?
Well, what we think here, and what's kind of obvious here, is this is a thing of a political nature. Like, there's no way they actually carved a tunnel of 1.2 kilometers under the prison to get him out. That's no way. We all know, he actually went through the main door. Like, there's no way somebody dug that tunnel without no one knowing.
And that raises the broader question, of course, that you and I are going to talk about a little bit, and that is the rule of law and whether economic freedom is possible there. But first, you mentioned something, there was the possibility he'd be extradited to the United States, in which case he might be somebody covered by some comments by a recent candidate for the presidency of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump. What do you think about the Donald's comments?
Well, he's been running his mouth lately, right? No, what he had to say is like, okay, he just declared like, the Chapo escaped, and now this is the proof of Mexican corruption. I think he's right on that. He's, of course, not right on all the other allegations he made when he said, like, Mexico only sends criminals and rapists to the States. Well, if I had to answer that as well, there's a reason why Mexico doesn't send their best into America, and that's because it's the same with gun control or the war on drugs. The visa requirements stop all the law-abiding Mexicans from migrating to America, and the drug lords, the criminals, the rapists, they don't care about visa requirements. They just jump over the fence and get there. So, well, but that's one of the things he said.
Well,
Back
there are
to
obviously,
Chapo.
yes, a lot of misconceptions that exist about people from all over the world as they come to the United States, and I'm sure a similar situation occurs in Mexico.
Well, we of course have a lot of immigrants here from South America, from Central America mostly, and from China, who come here, well, looking for jobs. Of course, Mexico doesn't have this tradition of immigration as America has, but we've been, I think, more supportive, like the Mexican police, the immigrant patrol, or I don't know how to call it. They actually try and help these people, but of course this causes the anger of many Americans because they help them like get over to the northern border and
yes.
try and pursue the American dream.
Well, on to more serious topics, although those are serious, but they are somewhat tangentially related to what you and I like to talk a lot about, and that is the condition of the rule of law. And that's because, as you and I hold, the rule of law is absolutely essential to economic freedom. Tell me a little bit, Jose, about some of the organizations you work with, particularly Caminos de la Libertad. What does that mean?
Caminos de la Libertad means the paths, the roads to freedom. It says a play on the
Hayek.
Friedrich Hayek's book, The Road to Serfdom. We wanted to make like the opposite, and that's, well, the roads to freedom, the roads to liberty. Actually, in Spanish, libertad, it's the only translation for both freedom and liberty. So we only have one word for that. And, well, what we do is we try to push the discussion of the ideas on liberty and freedom in the public in the public speech, because in Mexico we had a point, we got to a point in the early 2000s where liberty was almost already forgotten, like people weren't discussing it. It was like something you had like a given, and you know, we are free, but we don't speak much about it. And in the meanwhile, the state and the criminal organizations are a real threat to our liberty. So what Mr. Ricardo Salinas Pliego, the founder of Caminos de la Libertad, wanted was to put the liberty discussion back on the public agenda.
You know, what is the relationship between the rule of law and the ability to experience economic liberty? Why are they so closely related?
Well, first of all, what you need for a first component of both the rule of law and that it's so important for economic freedom are the property rights. Without property rights and proper enforcement and proper defense of property rights, and of course the defense of the life, that is the defense of the property of oneself, there's the first thing you need to have in order to actually be free to choose among the different satisfactors in your economic life. So this is like it's pretty fundamental when it comes to economic freedom, that you need to have some entity that is vigilant of the whole contracts, the property rights, and of course the rights, the self property rights as well.
So the converse would be that if we do not have property rights that are upheld by a legal system, individuals and corporations don't have property that they can rely on, and as a result, it is only the state that has control. So this is a very big issue, because the alternative is the state or the monarchy. Whoever is in power is the one that's ultimately in control. That's why individual freedom depends upon the holding of property rights.
Yeah, and of course there's also the need for certainty on your transactions. When there is no entity or no institution that is gonna make your contractors uphold what they sign in the contracts, you don't have certainty of your transactions. So you need to be really safe on that. You need to be certain that the deals are going to go across as you planned it, or as you agreed with the other party. So that's also a component of economic freedom. You need to have certainty, and that, of course, it's in order to have that certainty, you need a rule of law.
You know, oftentimes people think that some of the ideas that you and I stand for in our organizations are ideas promoted by quote-unquote capitalists who are characterized sometimes as being selfish and not caring for the broad spectrum of society. But isn't it the case that one of the most important pathways to being alleviated out of poverty is the opportunity to own personal property, to have real estate as essential to being able to build wealth and generational wealth for one's family, and that this really, it has to be one of the pathways to taking people from poverty.
Well, Mexico is a huge example of how you shouldn't do things when it comes to personal property or individual rights. Back in the early 20th century, they started the reparto agrario, that is like agricultural dealing, like they were giving away land for the people to use it as for agriculture. Of course, the government wasn't giving it away per se, but making them sign like, okay, you are gonna own this land, and what you're gonna do is, okay, we are gonna give it to a community. Of course, the land is gonna be owned by us, the government. We're going to lend it to you so you can use it. And it's have been like 100 years of that, and the Mexican agriculture is like the most backwards agriculture of, I believe, all North America, and compared to all the Americas. It's really because there's no property rights, so the people doesn't feel like the need to reinvest their earnings in the land.
That's
because
right.
It belongs to the government.
That's right.
So what you get is we don't have watering systems for the land. Well, there's a lot of problems, and it just fundamentally comes from the lack of property rights.
Well, what you're describing is something that was well understood both in Asia, Japan in particular, and throughout Europe in the Middle Ages. And I guess another way of looking at it is feudal serfdom. You've got the landlord who owns the land, you've got the serfs who live on the land, and at best they are the guests, at worst they are the serfs, and they lease the land. That was the case in the Mexican situation, a lease for a certain number of years rather than ownership. And as you pointed out, in addition to not being able to build generational wealth because families cannot pass this land on to their families in perpetuity, it also means you don't take care of it as well. You don't own it. Therefore, you do the least that is necessary in order to satisfy the landlord. Do you know, Jose, we have the same situation here for Native Hawaiians in the Hawaiian homelands. The vision of one of Hawaii's kings was that Hawaiians, like Americans, would have private property ownership and the rights that come with it. But now Hawaiians are able to lease the land, but not able to own it and pass it on to their families forever. So I understand what that is. Now, are there some solutions that are being developed quickly before we go to a break? But there are some solutions developing in Mexico for helping people to get land converted from leasehold to private property. Is that right?
Well, it's just came onto very recently when the government started to try and privatize some of these are called ejidos. There's not a translation there's not an English word for ejidos, but there were some efforts. But the problem is the people are, I don't know what's wrong with but people are really held up to their traditions. So they're mostly people on the left wing of the political parties. They're against everything that means the dissolvement of these property figure called the ejido I was telling you. So there has not been that many efforts to alleviate these problems. And
so the very people whom you would think would advocate for and be cheering this transition of property to private property on are the ones who are standing in the way of it. We're going to take a quick break, Jose. And when we come back, I want to ask you some questions about the conditions of economic freedom in the various cities and states throughout Mexico. Give us a quick report on what the state of economic freedom is in Mexico. My guest today is Jose Torra, an economist in Mexico, but more than that, a freedom fighter who is an outstanding and outspoken representative of the ideas of liberty in a nation in which they are very much needed. This is Keli'i Akina. You're watching Ehana Kako. We'll be right back after the short break.
Hi, Jay. My name's Keith Bettinger.
I knew that.
And I'm the host of ThinkTech Asia.
I knew that too.
Here on ThinkTech.
Fabulous. You got a great show going, Keith.
Thank you very much. And for our viewers out there that are interested in ThinkTech Asia, it airs every Tuesday from 4 to 4:45. And it can be accessed online at thinktech.com.
Yeah, so what kind of guests you like?
Well, we have a number of guests from academia, practitioners of international affairs. Sometimes we have military officials. Sometimes we have public officials on the show. And our goal, we try to talk about current issues in South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Central Asia, all throughout the Asian realm in more depth than you would find in traditional mainstream
That's
media.
the difference, isn't it?
Exactly.
That you're reaching out beyond what ordinary news media would do.
Right.
That's why we like you so much.
We're trying to provide a thinking person's perspective, an intelligent perspective on what's going on, and we're both sides of the story, or even when there's more than two sides, we try to cover every angle. And I think that that's one of the big benefits that we provide here at ThinkTech. Is it's a really innovative source of educational programming for the people of Hawaii.
You're great, Keith. You are a great host. You got a great show going on. I watch it every week.
Thanks very much.
Why don't you guys watch it every week too, okay?
4:45 to 4 to 4:45 every Tuesday.
Aloha and welcome back again to Ehana Kako. We're here every week on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Ehana Kako, that's based upon a venerable old saying here in Hawaii called a pule kako, which means let's pray together. Well, at the Frasier Institute of Hawaii, we also say Ehana Kako, which means let's work together. Let's work together, bringing all people together to build a better economy, a better government, and a better society. And I'm delighted today that I'm with someone who's in Mexico City by Skype, who is committed to building a better government, society, and economy, and that's Jose Torra. Jose is an economist, and we've been talking about some of the ideas of economic freedom. Jose, economic freedom, as you and I know, involves very importantly property rights, so that there is the security that people can actually conduct transactions. And it also involves the ability of individuals freely to conduct transactions with each other without the government interfering. Now, you are very much involved in measuring this all throughout the nation of Mexico, because you have been assigned by the Frasier Institute to be the Mexico lead author on the Economic Freedom of North America report. Tell us a little bit about that report and how it pertains to Mexico.
Well, it was an effort that actually started in 1999, and Mexico didn't come into the report until the year 2012, where there was a team of researchers in Texas that tried to like bring the Mexican data into it. Of course, Mexican data is not easy to work with, because we have a geography institute that is the one responsible of holding all the statistics, some sort of like the BEA in the States, and it's a labyrinth to work with that data. So of course, last year the Frasier Institute took a hold of my organization that is part of the Economic Freedom Network. That is the network that backs all the Frasier Institute research, and they got in contact with me and they asked, can you do this? Can you put Mexico in the Economic Freedom of North America? And well, I told them I can try. And well, I did my best, and finally last year we got to get Mexico in for the first time in the Economic Freedom of North America 2014. And well, Mexico did not do good in the Economic Freedom of North America. What we do is we measure the 50 states of the United States, 10 provinces in Canada, and the 32 states in Mexico. So we make a ranking of which one has more freedom or less economic freedom. And well, Mexico, in the Economic Freedom of the World report that the Frasier Institute does yearly, as a whole nation, Mexico ranks 91 out of 152 nations. And Canada is in the top 10, I believe. The United States are maybe ranked 11 or 12. I'm not really sure about
right.
these.
The United States is in the second 10 now, having dropped down to about 13.
So what we have is, well, Mexico ranking 91st out of 152. Of course, the Mexican state wouldn't be able to compete on the same level in economic freedom against some of the American states or Canadian provinces. But of course, what we had here is our first, the state that got ranked higher was Coahuila, Zaragoza. And it actually got over, I believe, let me tell you the date. I have the report right here, and sorry for not memorizing this, but I work with so many numbers usually that it's kind of hard. But Coahuila actually ranked before a lot of U.S. states, New Jersey, Florida, and some Canadian provinces as New Brunswick, Hawaii, of course.
That's right. Which is amazing. We've got two reports that we're looking at. We've got the Economic Freedom of the World that ranks countries, and you've referred to that, and where Mexico is in the 90s, the United States is up in the teens. But we've got the Economic Freedom of North America, which also ranks subnational groups like states. So this is quite amazing that Hawaii, and I say this to our audience here in the state of Hawaii, we are ranked on that chart in the orange zone, which is as low as you can possibly get. And as Jose has just pointed out, there actually are some Mexican states, in fact, the state you were just talking about, what's the name of that state? That
Coahuila.
actually, yes, that actually outranks Hawaii in terms of economic freedom. And that's quite amazing. Now, when we go into actually what the economic freedom is, let's take a quick scan across the country. How does the rule of law do when we measure it in places like Mexico City and then in some of the other outlying regions? There's some variety, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Mexico is not a homogeneous country when it comes to the rule of law, and this is something that we weren't able to measure properly in this report, the 2014 report. Of course, we're trying to fix it for this year's report, and we are like having some advances, but we may be able to have it ready for 2016. But well, of course, we know it's something you see from just the observation. You can know that in Mexico, the rule of law is really heterogeneous. Like Coahuila de Zaragoza, that is the state that ranks the first in economic freedom for 2014, is one of the countries with the most crime and the most drug cartels. The thing why it ranks so high, it's because they went broke. They went broke in 2011 after a wave of irresponsible spending by the governor. Let me tell you this story. There was this governor, his last name Moreira, and what he did was, okay, well, people are really happy people are really worried here in Coahuila because of the crime and because of the cartels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give monthly a check for 1,000 pesos, that would be like $100 of 2011, and monthly to every Coahuila citizen. So what they did, they started writing these checks and going into debt, and of course, the federal government cannot stop them from taking debt. And so, well, they took debt and debt and debt, and they finally ended by going into bankruptcy. The state went into bankruptcy. They had to shut down most of the programs, and now they're going into a forced austerity program. So now they're spending the lowest. They're taxing not that high, and that's why they managed to be so high. But if we actually measured the rule of law there, Coahuila would have been really lower. And some of the states, as you say, Distrito Federal, the Mexico City region, would actually rank higher than the position it was. Mexico City in the all government index, let me just explain here. We have two indices. One is the all government index that measures state level, municipality level, and federal level, and of course the subnational level, the subnational index that only measures municipalities and the state level. So of course, for measuring Mexico, due to the amount of centralization we have, 96% of all taxation is federal here in Mexico. The index you need to measure among the rankings among the Mexican states is, of course, the all government index. Mexico City ranks second to last in the whole ranking, like of the 50 states in the United States, of the 10 provinces in Canada, and the 32 states in Mexico, Distrito Federal is second to last. Distrito Federal being the Mexico City region. What we have here is it being one of the safest and one of the states with the most certainty in the rule of law. It actually ranks pretty low. Of course, that's because most of the government agencies operate here, and there's a huge amount of government employment instead of I would say, I don't know if this is politically correct, but the ratio of government employment to productive employment is actually really low here no, really high here in Mexico City.
So there are sometimes some anomalies where some states are ranked higher in the value of economic freedom or the rule of law just because of the fact that certain of the variables have dropped, but not for a positive reason necessarily. You know, here in the state of Hawaii, we measure economic freedom. The Frasier report does, and I'm very glad to be part of that network with you. But one may object and say, how can you possibly compare the economic freedom of a state in the United States with a state in Mexico? And I think that we can't compare everything, but there are some parameters that we can look at that are comparable. The reason Hawaii ranks low in terms of the nation here for economic freedom is basically threefold. Number one, the percentage of money that is spent on our government compared to our gross domestic product. In other words, how big government is really in Hawaii and as a percentage of the overall gross domestic product. Secondly, the extent to which we are taking money from our people through taxes and through other kinds of regulatory costs. And the third, of how free it is actually to go to work anywhere you want to work in terms of job opportunity. We're fairly low in terms of a right to work state because a very high percentage of the jobs here are related to unions. So we take those three measures. Number one, the size of government compared to the gross domestic product. Number two, the level of takings and taxation. And number three, the opportunity for free markets and labor. Now, is this how you're measuring the economic freedom in the states in Mexico, and how do they stand up overall in terms of that?
Well, what you're saying of Hawaii is something I can relate as being a Mexico City citizen. Like, we also have a huge problem with the employment side because of all the employment regulation and unions. And the taxation, when as I was telling you, when we look at the subnational level rankings for Mexico, we see some of the most productive states in the first places, like Guanajuato is in the first place in the this is a state in the central region of Mexico, which has all these developments in industry, automotive industry, like our Mexican Detroit Detroit back then. And then we have Nuevo León on the third place, Sonora on the fourth place, and Mexico City, the Mexico City region around the 16th place. This in the subnational level. When we get into the all government level, we add the federal taxation that, as I told you, is 96% of the whole taxation here. And of course, the federal regulations on employment, the federal unions that in order to hire something, you have to go into collective bargaining. The fact that you cannot fire people because of the cost of firing people are really, really high. When you want to hire, of course, you also need to go into a contract that needs you to agree of those rules that you're not going to be able to fire this person in the near future. So when you add all the federal regulations into this, the most productive state like Nuevo León, that is one of the most heavily industrialized regions in Mexico. It has all the cement industry and well, it goes from the third place to the 21st place when you bring in the federal regulations.
It's something.
Distrito Federal, the Mexico City region, goes from 16th to 31st.
So what you basically are describing is that the government itself at the federal level, central control, plays a huge factor in determining the economic health of the various states in the nation, and perhaps an inordinate factor so that they're not able themselves to determine the state of their economic freedom. I want to talk a little more about that and ask you a bit about solutions. How do we use this data? How are we making it known throughout Mexico and elsewhere? And how can we come up with good solutions that we can recommend to policymakers? We're going to take a quick break. I'm talking to Jose Torra, who is an economist in Mexico, who fights for economic liberty, freedom through educational and policy programs. We'll be right back with Ehana Kako after this short message. Don't go away.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I'm a senator from the Big Island. I work in the ER there. But on Tuesday afternoons, I get to come and spend 45 minutes to an hour with Jay Fidel and the ThinkTech staff. They're terrific professionals. They help us to bring some of the leading cutting-edge topics here across our state to you. So you can join us at our show on healthcare in Hawaii to talk with leaders from across all the spectrum of health in our state, or you can join us for any other show where we talk about economic development or tourism, or some really eclectic programs too. So really, we'd love to see you here on our show. Thanks for joining us and thanks for supporting us.
Hi, I'm Chris Leatham, and I'd like to invite you to come and watch my show every Wednesday at 3. I'm interested in a variety of issues that have to do with politics and our local business economy. And I'd like to bring on guests who like to talk about everything from technology to social media to what we can be doing to improve our environment. And so I'd like to invite you every Wednesday at 3 to stay and watch my show here with ThinkTech Hawaii. And I'll see you there.
Welcome back to the final segment today of Ehana Kako here every week on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. And by the way, you can watch ThinkTech Hawaii any time of day or night. So if you're up at 2 a.m. and struggling with sleep, turn on the channel. Just go to your computer to thinktechhawaii.com, and we're live streaming round the clock. ThinkTech Hawaii is a great organization. Thanks to Jay Fidel and the team over here for producing about 30 to 35 hours of content every week, talking about issues that matter to Hawaii and the world. Today, we're talking about an issue that matters to everybody in the world, and that is the quality of economic freedom. And I hope you appreciate the fact that we've been able to go into some of the nuts and bolts technically, because there's very little talk about economic freedom and what it consists of and how it is measured. And I'm really delighted that today we're with a true expert, both in the academic sense as an economist, but also in the sense of being somebody who applies this knowledge to the real world, and that's Jose Torra of Mexico. Jose, I was fascinated at a recent working group conference that you and I participated in which we flew to Houston and or Dallas, that was. We flew to Dallas and got together with about a dozen other people who are actually contributing to the Economic Freedom of North America report, worked out some nuts and bolts. And I remember a story that you told as you began to explain how you take this academic knowledge and begin using it to affect policy. First of all, congratulations, because just to have that knowledge out there is very significant. It's something new that is going on in Mexico that hasn't been done yet, and so that's going to lead to a lot of application. But I'd like you to tell a little bit about how you're promoting this. I think you do something. You go to a city and you conduct an economic audit, or you go to a state and conduct an economic freedom audit. Is that right?
Well, what we do, we have been touring, yes, the states, first of the states that rank higher. What we do, of course, is when you try to get to a Mexican governor, and this story you've heard, but I'll tell it. You can be an institution or a think tank or anyone, and you can like knock on the governor's door and you will get ignored. But of course, in Mexico, there's a thing. Then when you say you come from a well-respected, leading think tank in Canada, and you sir have done such a great job that you ranked amongst the first states in economic freedom. Of course, they want you to be there. They want you to tell them what's good and what's not good, so they can be like in the public eye and have this, because flattery is a way to get to a human heart. Like you flatter the governor, and of course he's gonna say, okay, I want these people to tell me more about it, and it opens the door for you to like actually go into their data and actually tell them like, well, you rank high because of this and this, and what you should be doing is, well, they usually want to like make it a whole thing with the press and that kind of stuff. So what we do there is we go, we talk to them, we make a presentation, we congratulate them on the good job. But of course, we can't, like, as a researcher, I wouldn't feel good if I were actually just flattering a governor without telling him, okay, but you're also doing this stuff wrong. So what we do is we get into some recommendations on what public policies they can apply from the state level to actually improve the economic freedom in their states. And of course, what we try to make them see is that the big problem, the huge problem with economic freedom in Mexico, apart from, of course, the rule of law, is that the degree of centralization doesn't give you a whole lot of room to actually maneuver as a governor in terms of productivity in your state. What we need to make the governors know is that when they ask for more states' rights, that is something that Mexico is unheard of. When they ask for more states' rights, they actually have a better room to make it better, to make their citizens more free, to attract investment, to improve the productivity in Mexico. And of course, that is something that has gone to, well, governors want to hear it, and we have had good reception with this.
Well, Jose, you are answering the next question that I wanted to ask you, and that is, what are some practical solutions that you can bring? And the one you're talking about is promoting the concept of states' rights. What in particular goes into some of the states' rights? What rights in particular could states ask for that could let them have greater autonomy and productivity in terms of their economic freedom?
Well, here in Mexico, we have problems with most of the government, of the central federal government regulations. What the states should need to ask is like to have the power to like make their own regulations. They already have their own constitutions and some of the taxation. But in Mexico, well, the comparison here is in the states you have, for each state you have a different income tax. And some states is lower, some states it's higher. It depends, of course, on the will. We would say, I'm not really sure I'm telling the truth here, but it depends on the will of the electorate. Of the people is vote for a party that wants more taxation, or a party that wants least taxation. Or so here in Mexico, the thing is, it doesn't matter what the parties want when it comes for the governors or the state. The House of Representatives in each state, because what they can do as state representatives or as a state governor is really small, because of course the federal government has all this power over what can be done. What we tell them that first of all we need to invert the fiscal pyramid, we call it here in Mexico. 96% of all taxes are federal. What we can derive from this is that most of the money that is being spent by the government is being decided in Mexico City by people that haven't been in the states in a long time, so they don't know the needs of the people in each state. What we need to invert this so that the regions have the responsibility to tax according of what they know the people have and what the people need, of course. When you bring the government closer to the people, you're actually making a smaller government.
You know, in the United States, as well as Europe and other parts of the world, people sometimes argue that central government is a great solution because of the economies of scale, the ability to build a safety net under all people equitably across the country and so forth. But what are your thoughts about that? Obviously, you see some real problems with central control. What are the chief problems with central control over the economy?
Well, we could take a look at the state of Mexico, Campeche. Campeche ranks in the All Government Economic Freedom Index. It ranks in the position 26th. Okay, it's 26th. It's one of the most rich states there is because they have all of the oil production. Of course, in Mexico, oil mining is state. It's done by a state enterprise called Pemex. Well, the thing here is most of that money that Pemex is making in Campeche is not reused in Campeche. It's not made for reinvestment in Pemex. And of course, all that money that is being produced there is being sent to Mexico City. And in Mexico City, it's well, it's used for what the government think is best, and of course what the government has, in Mexico at least, think is best is use it to make the union leaders, the oil union leaders rich. So what the problem here is when you have, of course, all of this money that is coming from Pemex, from Campeche, is coming via taxes. Pemex pays around, well, for 2010 it paid around 150% of their earnings in taxes. That they had to sell some of their assets in order to pay all the impositive charges that they have to pay. So they send this money to Mexico City. It's never reused in Campeche. Mexico is a country without a refinery. We don't refine gasoline or oil derivatives, and that's because they're not reinvesting this money. And one of the focal points of that is if Campeche had the right to have a better fiscal or its own fiscal regime compared to the actual federal regime, they could actually make a new investment in, not that I say this is the optimal, but they could actually use it for the improvement of Campeche's own condition. What is happening is we, as you say, okay, this is the centralization is actually a solution. Well, what we're seeing here is Mexico has full decentralization, and the only thing we see is Mexico City being one of the richest states, and some of the states who pay the most taxes are actually not that prosperous.
Well, I think it would be very fruitful to make comparisons between the United States as a nation and Mexico as a nation with respect to the movement toward centralization. Here in our nation, one of the most significant steps toward greater central control has been the Affordable Care Act for health care. And in the state of Hawaii, that resulted in something that has negatively impacted our health care delivery, which became quite efficient at a time when it had been left to the states. We've run out of time, and there's so much more to talk about, but I hope we have for our viewers at least opened up the intriguing concept of making some kinds of comparisons between nations and between states within nations. Before we go, Jose, maybe in the last minute, you could give some kind of prescription that would lead to a freer economy in Mexico, some kind of prescription that can be used anywhere in the world.
Well, what I wrote here in my essay on the economic freedom of Mexican states, what Mexico needs desperately is our property rights that are greatly, really defined in our Constitution. Our Constitution has an article number 27 that has the figure written for private property. We need, first of that, we need private property. Once that you have private property rights pretty good defined, you have to start defending them. So you have to start with the rule of law. That's what I would have to say. We need property rights, and after we have property rights now, we should battle corruption, we should battle the crime. That is, if not, you're actually just distracting yourself. You're playing with your own mind when you say, okay, we're going to fight corruption and crime. When you have no property rights, it makes no sense. We need property rights now, at least here in Mexico. Yeah.
Great insights, Jose. Thank you very much for being on our program today. And from Hawaii, I say aloha to you. Thank you very much. My guest today is economist Jose Torra, who is the principal author for Mexico of the Economic Freedom of North America report put out by the prestigious Frasier Institute. He also is involved in several liberty organizations throughout Mexico, fighting for economic liberty and the rule of law. I want to say thanks again to Jose Torra and to all of you who are watching. This is Ehana Kako on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. We'll see you back again next week. Aloha.